It was a Wednesday. I remember that detail clearly because Wednesdays are when I usually leave work a bit early to clear my head at the marina. I like the calm of the harbor, watching the water churn while everyone else rushes home. But that day, as soon as I stepped through the door, Bianca was already waiting in the living room, legs crossed like a judge about to hand down a sentence. Her face was expressionless, that same tired smugness she wore whenever she thought she was doing something for the greater good, which usually meant for herself. "Sit down," she said, not looking up from her phone. I didn't sit. I stood there, waiting. I've learned that when you respond to her immediately, it feeds the performance. Then she sighed dramatically and finally looked up. "You'll teach Mateo to run your company," she said, as casually as someone asking for the salt at dinner. 1 month. No excuses. Just like that. No discussion, no context, no explanation of why her 26-year-old cousin, who once called duct tape entrepreneurial magic, was suddenly being handed the keys to the company I built from the ground up. I blinked. "Come again." She went right back to her phone, like the conversation was over. "He's coming tomorrow. First day. I already told him you'd give him full access. You'll be training him in every department. You'll teach him how to manage, how to talk to the board, how to handle payroll, logistics, everything." I was silent for a long second. I think she mistook that for compliance. But in reality, I was just trying to absorb the insanity of it all. Then, right in front of me, like I was invisible, she sent a voice note to her mother, in Spanish. I heard it loud and clear. "Once he's done training Mateo, we'll divorce him. He's just the test dummy." Her voice was light, confident, almost amused. That's when I knew this wasn't about business. It wasn't even about Mateo. This was about power, control, and the fact that she thought I was too dumb to notice I was being set up. The irony? I was born in Bogota. Spanish is my first language. I just never told her. I learned a long time ago that the most dangerous advantage a man can have is to let others believe he's unarmed. So I smiled. A soft, practiced smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Sure," I said. "Let's get started." She looked up at me then, surprised by how easily I'd agreed. Her expression shifted quickly into one of thinly veiled victory. "Good," she said, then turned back to her phone. But something shifted in me at that moment. The betrayal didn't make me angry. No, anger would have given her too much credit. What I felt was colder, focused, mechanical, like someone flipping a switch inside me. I wasn't the test dummy. I was the engineer. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in my home office with the lights off, just the soft glow of my laptop screen illuminating the room. I scrolled through her social media, saw the recent selfies with Mateo tagged in the background. Drinks, bars, rooftop lounges. The kind of places I used to take her to when we were young and building our life together. And now? They had already decided to erase me. But the one thing they underestimated, both of them, really, was that you don't erase a man who built his life brick by brick. You don't dismiss the one holding the blueprint. I started drawing up a plan that night. I listed everything Mateo would ask for, everything he would need access to. Then I made 2 versions of every document, one real, one theatrical. I created new spreadsheets, altered passwords, and rerouted system notifications. I knew exactly how much to give him to make him feel powerful, just enough to inflate his ego, not enough to teach him anything real. Bianca didn't come to bed that night. I didn't ask. I didn't care. The roles had changed. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her illusion. The next morning, I dressed in my usual gray blazer and dark jeans, like nothing had changed. When I walked into the office, I was greeted by a few familiar faces, loyal ones, the kind who knew better than to question me but were wise enough to sense something shifting in the air. I introduced Mateo to the staff at the Monday team meeting. "Everyone, meet Mateo. He's shadowing me this month to understand how we operate." There were polite nods, a few curious glances, and 1 or 2 raised eyebrows. But I kept my face neutral, pleasant. I walked him through the first floor, logistics, inventory, client coordination. I gave him mock reports, trained him on dummy data, all while redirecting the real operations to a separate, encrypted interface known only to me and the board's acting chairman. Every evening, Bianca would ask how it was going. "Mateo's learning fast," I'd say with a smile. And it was true in the way a toddler learns to mimic a grown-up by copying gestures without grasping meaning. She would kiss my cheek and thank me sweetly, and I would nod like I believed it. But each interaction felt like I was wearing gloves, every emotion filtered, every move calculated. I started eating dinner later, working longer, moving quieter. I wanted her to think she was winning, that I was folding, that the plan was working. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already started rewriting the ending. In her story, I was the test dummy. In mine, she was walking straight into a trap with her cousin leading the charge. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight for her love like some broken man trying to salvage a marriage that had already died in silence. No, I was going to let her feel the thrill of her little plot. Let her believe she had fooled me. Let her and Mateo laugh over drinks about how easy it was to use me. And then, I'd flip the switch. The test dummy would come to life. And they would learn the hard way that the man they underestimated was the same man who built everything they thought they could steal. Mateo arrived on a Thursday morning wearing a suit that was too tight around the shoulders and a cologne strong enough to fumigate the parking lot. He strolled into North Harbor Mechanical like he owned it, flashing his teeth at the receptionist, throwing a wink at my executive assistant, then offering me a handshake as if we were old friends and not about to play the strangest game of business charades I'd ever seen. Cousin-in-law, he grinned, emphasizing the title like it gave him instant credibility. Ready to pass the torch? I smiled back, perfectly calm. Ready when you are. He had no idea I had already spent the previous week reshaping the very foundation of this company behind his back. The passwords he'd be given wouldn't lead to anything of real importance. The files he'd read were outdated, scrubbed, or designed to confuse. He'd be learning, but only what I wanted him to learn. It was a performance, and I was directing every scene. Our first stop was logistics. I walked him through our shipping schedules, made him sit through a morning call with one of our East Coast suppliers, then handed him a summary report that conveniently omitted half the vendor details. He skimmed it like a teenager cramming for a test, nodding as if he already understood it all. Looks simple enough, he said, leaning back in his chair. I'm surprised you haven't automated more of this. I looked at him. Well, you've got a month to figure out how to do it better, right? He laughed, smug and careless. Exactly. Bianca showed up that afternoon, pretending to check in, but her tone was dripping with barely concealed condescension. She kissed me on the cheek in front of the staff and placed a coffee beside me like we were still a team. Be nice to him, she whispered. He's eager. I leaned closer and whispered back. So was the Titanic. Her brow furrowed, but she let it go. She thought I was just being snarky. She had no idea I was already preparing to sink every illusion she had built with her cousin. Every day followed a pattern. I'd bring Mateo into meetings with department heads, watching him take notes that made no sense, ask questions that only revealed how little he understood. He'd interrupt presentations with suggestions that had already been tested and abandoned years ago. And each time, I nodded, let him feel clever, let him believe he was discovering something. He bragged to the HR manager about how he would rebrand the culture, told my finance lead he planned to cut down waste, without realizing he was looking at profit-maximized budgets already trimmed to the decimal. The kid was loud, clueless, and somehow proud of both. Behind the scenes, I was busy laying down the real framework. I called Raphael, our silent partner based in Austin, and asked him to speed up the restructuring paperwork. I spoke with our legal counsel, moved 3 key patents under a new shell entity, and began the process of changing our digital infrastructure. My IT manager thought it was part of a routine audit. My team was too disciplined to question the details. On the surface, it looked like Mateo was absorbing everything. But in reality, he was standing in a house made of mirrors, and every reflection he saw was a projection of what I wanted him to believe. There was one moment, though, that caught me off guard. It was late, well after 9 p.m. The office was mostly dark. I'd stayed behind to finish an email to one of our core investors when I saw Mateo in the break room, microwaving leftover pizza and scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up, startled. Oh, didn't know you were still here, he said. Always here, I replied, sipping my tea. He hesitated, then said, Hey, seriously, thanks for this opportunity. I know it probably feels weird, you training me and all. It was the first time I saw a sliver of humanity in him. I almost believed it. Almost. But then he added, Don't worry. Once everything's official, I'll make sure you're remembered. Remembered. That word echoed in my head like a warning bell. He didn't even try to hide the plan anymore. They weren't just planning to remove me. They were planning to erase me. Turn me into a footnote in the company I built with blood and blistered hands. Appreciate that, I said evenly. Legacy matters. He nodded, completely missing the undertone. The next morning, Bianca sent me a message with a little heart emoji. You're doing great. I'm proud of you. I almost laughed. Proud? She thought she was grooming her cousin to take over while keeping me docile and helpful. She didn't realize I had already activated a series of internal transitions that would permanently shut her out. The assets she thought were still accessible to her were already in the hands of a private trust fund, one she wasn't even authorized to touch. She was too busy playing chess with a fake board. Mateo's arrogance grew with each passing week. He started referring to the office as our company. He booked meetings with junior managers behind my back. He even adjusted the thermostat in the boardroom to his comfort level. Every time he did something dumb, I made a note. Quietly, meticulously. My goal wasn't to humiliate him. It was to document a clear timeline of incompetence, something I could use if things ever turned litigious. One Friday afternoon, Bianca brought lunch to the office. Sandwiches and fresh juice from some overpriced cafe. She sat in the conference room with Mateo, giggling as they discussed future plans, company culture, branding ideas. They didn't even invite me. I watched them through the glass wall, unnoticed. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something sharp in my chest, not anger, but disappointment. Not because of the betrayal, I'd already accepted that, but because the woman I once dreamed with had become this shallow, smug version of herself, and she thought I was too blind to notice. I went back to my office and opened the drawer with the original shareholder agreement. Still signed by me, still valid. That paper, and the quiet legal work I'd done with Raphael, were the reasons I wasn't worried. Let them eat their sandwiches. Let them plot. The clock was ticking. They thought they had a month. But what they didn't realize is that the moment Bianca sent that text in Spanish, the countdown didn't start for me, it started for them. And when the timer hit 0, they wouldn't just lose the game. They'd realize they were never playing it in the first place. The 30 days passed quickly, at least for them. Bianca counted down like it was a vacation to Paris. Mateo walked around with his chest puffed, already acting like a CEO. And me? I just kept smiling, nodding, handing over files like a good little test dummy. Every time they whispered in corners or exchanged knowing looks, I reminded myself, patience wins wars. This wasn't just a takedown, it was a lesson, one they'd never forget. It was a Friday morning when Bianca strolled into my office in a silk blouse and that smug look she wore whenever she thought she'd gotten the last word. Mateo followed behind her, dressed like he was about to shoot a fashion campaign instead of run a mechanical contracting firm. I was at my desk, reviewing an email from our legal team confirming that the restructuring had finalized. The moment had arrived. "Do you have what we talked about?" she asked, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. I looked up. The login. She smiled, her eyes gleaming. Yes. I pulled open the drawer slowly, theatrically. If they wanted a performance, I'd give them one. I slid the folder across the desk. "Everything you need is in here," I said, keeping my voice steady. Access to the admin portal, account dashboards, even our client tracker. Mateo grabbed it before she could. He flipped through the pages like a kid on Christmas morning. Finally, he muttered, "No more training wheels." Bianca leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. It was the most affection she'd shown in weeks. "Thank you," she said, like she was speaking to a retired soldier. "You've been incredibly helpful." I stood up, buttoned my blazer, and adjusted my watch. "I'm glad to hear that." I was beginning to wonder if I'd overstayed my usefulness. She laughed. "Come on, don't be dramatic." "Oh, I'm not," I said softly. "In fact, I have something else for you." I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain white envelope. No label, no markings, just thick enough to hold one sheet of paper. I handed it to her. "Call it a bonus." She raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "Open it," I said, and then stepped back to watch. She tore it open slowly, probably expecting some sentimental thank you letter or a parting gift. Her eyes scanned the paper once, then again. The blood drained from her face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Mateo, still holding the folder, leaned over her shoulder. "What's wrong?" She didn't speak. She just handed it to him with a trembling hand. He read it out loud. "This is a screenshot of a message to your mom?" He looked up at me. "So?" I walked around my desk and stood across from them. "Read the translation." His eyes dropped to the bottom of the page, and that smug smirk of his vanished. "Once he's done training Mateo, we'll divorce him. He's just the test dummy." Mateo looked at Bianca like he'd just seen her for the first time. "You said that." I didn't mean it," she stammered. "It was just a joke, just something I said to Mom. He wasn't supposed to see it." "But I did see it," I said calmly, "because I speak Spanish fluently. You didn't know that, Bianca, because in all these years, you never cared enough to ask." She blinked rapidly, stunned into silence. Mateo dropped the folder onto the desk. Is this real access? He asked me. Are these real accounts? I smiled and shrugged. Sure looks like it, doesn't it? He started typing frantically into his phone. I knew exactly what he was about to find. The system would load. The dashboard would appear. But the numbers wouldn't make sense. No live data. No payment trails. Just placeholder figures, scrubbed metadata, and expired login credentials to dummy platforms. He frowned. Wait, this doesn't match the reports. The revenue projections are wrong. Where's the payroll backend? I walked back to my chair and sat down slowly. What you're looking at is a mirror, Mateo. A very convincing one. I call it a shadow box. It's a replica, a simulation of the real thing. Looks good on paper, useless in practice. Bianca looked like she couldn't breathe. What did you do? What you forced me to, I replied, my tone even colder now. The real business, the accounts, the assets, the IP, the client relationships, they're all under Radcliffe Solutions now. It's a holding company, legally protected, owned entirely by, not you. Her voice cracked. But we're married. Not in business, I said. Not anymore. Not since I moved everything last quarter. You were too busy planning my exit to notice I was already halfway through the door. Mateo stood there, still trying to log in, his face twitching in frustration. You tricked me. I trained you, I said. Trained you to believe what you saw was the whole picture. You never once asked the right questions. You thought surface-level charts and outdated reports were enough to build an empire. He looked ready to throw the folder at me. Bianca finally found her voice. You planned this. Yes, I said, standing again and collecting my phone from the desk. The moment you sent that message to your mother. The moment you decided I was disposable. I knew what I had to do. I gave you everything, she whispered, tears forming. I supported you. You gave me headaches, I replied. And you supported yourself, your image, your cousin, your mother's opinions. This company? I built it without shortcuts, without manipulation. And now, it's built to last, without you. Mateo picked up the folder and slammed it shut. You're going to regret this. I looked him dead in the eye. You should have spent less time trying to be me and more time trying to understand me. He stormed out. Bianca stood still, shaking slightly. Where are you going? I'm done here, I said, brushing past her. Enjoy your shadow empire. As I walked through the office, my employees looked up. Some nodded. Some just watched. They knew something had shifted. And I didn't need to explain a thing. Outside, I took one deep breath. The air tasted cleaner than it had in weeks. I felt light. Not just free from them, but free from the version of myself that tolerated disrespect for the sake of peace. I pulled out my phone and texted Raphael. Phase 2 complete. Then I got in my car and drove home, not to the house Bianca filled with her expensive taste and cold silences, but to my beach condo. The one she used to mock. The one that was mine, and mine alone. The dummy had delivered his final lesson, and class was officially dismissed. I expected the phone call before I even got home. Bianca wasn't the type to go down quietly. Sure enough, as I pulled into the condo garage, the screen lit up. Her name. I let it ring out. Then it came again. And again. I turned the phone off. That night, I stood on the balcony, watching the waves roll in beneath the moonlight. There was no satisfaction, not yet, just silence. But that silence? It was mine. Nobody talking down to me. No cousin playing CEO. No whispered betrayals behind my back. Just the ocean, my glass of bourbon, and the comfort of knowing I had finally taken my life back. The next morning, the fallout began in earnest. It started with a barrage of messages from Bianca, long texts, voice notes, half apologies that quickly turned into insults when I didn't respond. You misunderstood everything. We were joking. You're overreacting. Then the tone shifted. How dare you humiliate me like? Instead, I focused on finalizing the full legal transition of ownership to Radcliffe Solutions. The paperwork had already been filed weeks ago. All that was left now was the public record change. Raphael had done a flawless job. Everything had been quietly separated from my name in stages, legally protected and tied to an LLC Bianca had never even heard of. As far as the state was concerned, I was now a consultant. No title, no control, no liability, just a clean slate wrapped in corporate armor. Later that day, I got a call from Mateo's number. I stared at it for a while, then let it ring. A few minutes later, an email came in from my assistant. Mateo tried to enter the finance server today. Our IT protocols locked him out automatically. I smiled. Another update followed from our security lead. Your wife's building badge was deactivated per your instructions. She tried to access the executive floor. Security escorted her out. I sat back in my chair and exhaled. The castle they thought they owned had suddenly closed its gates. But that was just the beginning. 2 days later, I got word from the bank. Bianca had attempted to access our joint savings, only to find it nearly empty. She must have assumed I hadn't moved anything. Truth was, I'd restructured all financials the same week she first mentioned her cousin shadowing me. She was so preoccupied with her plan she never saw it happening. The shared business credit card? Closed. The car she drove? Technically leased under my name. I had it reclaimed quietly through the dealership. I watched the security footage later, Bianca standing on the sidewalk in her heels, watching the car get towed while yelling at the poor man doing his job. It wasn't revenge. It was consequences. She sent me one final voice message that night. Her voice was trembling. What did I ever do to deserve this, huh? After everything I gave you? This is cruel, even for you. Please, just talk to me. Everything she gave me. That was always her narrative. Like I was some project she built and got bored of. But the truth? She latched onto what I built. I gave her access, stability, reputation. She used my name to climb socially, to impress her mother, to pretend she belonged in rooms she never earned a place in. And when she thought she'd outgrown me, she tried to replace me. Now, all she had were the ashes of a plan she thought was bulletproof. Mateo, on the other hand, was unraveling even faster. Apparently, he'd started pitching himself to other companies using the North Harbor name. Bad move. I had already anticipated this. That's why Raphael had filed for trademark protections the week before I handed over the dummy login. My attorney forwarded me a copy of the cease and desist letter sent to Mateo's inbox. It was clean, cold, and surgical. The response? Mateo replied with a pathetic 3-sentence email claiming he was misled and deceived, and that he had been under the impression he was part of the executive team. That made me laugh. Out loud. The kind of laugh that comes from watching someone trip on their own ego. But there was one moment that stopped me in my tracks. Around the third day, I got a call from Carlos Duran, my longtime mentor and now quiet partner in the restructured company. I respected Carlos deeply. He was the one who had encouraged me to start North Harbor all those years ago when I was still working out of a rented warehouse with one employee in a busted van. You sure about all this? He asked. Dead sure, I replied. Carlos paused. I only ask because sometimes, when you win like this, it's easy to get lost in the wreckage. I didn't speak right away. He had a point. The power felt good, but not because it hurt them. It felt good because it reminded me who I was before I started compromising to make a marriage work that had long stopped serving either of us. I'm not lost, I told him. I'm finally standing where I should have been all along. He accepted that. Then keep your head clear. And make sure when the dust settles, you're building, not just burning. That stuck with me. So I made a choice right then. No more focusing on them. No more checking to see if Bianca had sent another message. No more tracking Mateo's failure. I had done what needed to be done. And now it was time to move forward. The next morning, I wrote a formal resignation letter, addressed to the old version of myself. The man who tolerated silence at dinner, who endured condescension at family events, who trained a clown to steal his throne just to keep peace in the household. That man was gone. I signed it, burned it in a ceramic bowl, watched the flame eat through the paper until all that remained was ash. I emailed Raphael and Carlos. Let's move forward. No more backward glances. And just like that, I walked into the next phase of my life. Clean, calm, unbothered. Bianca and Mateo? They could stand in the rubble all they wanted, trying to piece together a blueprint they never understood. But I was already laying the foundation for something greater. And this time, no one, not a wife, not a cousin, not a whispering mother-in-law, would ever get their hands on it again. The press conference wasn't for show, it was strategy. I wanted the world to see the new face of my company, the real version, built from the wreckage of betrayal and now heading in a sharper, cleaner direction. I picked the venue myself, a restored waterfront warehouse, symbolic of where it all began for me. Not the high-rise conference rooms Bianca favored, not the glass towers she liked posting selfies in, but the gritty, open space where dreams are built with sweat and steel. Reporters filed in slowly, murmuring as they saw the rebranded banner behind the podium. Harbor-Built Energy Solutions, not just a new name, but a statement of intention. Sustainable, lean, and unshakable. I stood at the center, dressed in navy and gray, confident but understated. I didn't need theatrics. I had truth. To my left stood Renee, my new VP of strategy. Sharp, composed, and respected in the energy sector. I'd met her years ago at an industry expo, and we'd stayed loosely connected. When I called her 3 weeks ago with the proposal, she didn't hesitate. "I've watched you survive storms that would have crushed other men," she said. "Let's build something that lasts." And to my right, Carlos Duran, my mentor, the man who taught me that silence can be louder than shouting, that real leadership doesn't need applause. Just his presence there said everything. He'd come out of retirement for this. That alone was headline-worthy. I stepped up to the microphone and took a breath. "Good morning," I began. "Some of you know me. Some of you know parts of my story. But today isn't about the past. It's about evolution, growth, and the decision to lead with purpose instead of ego." Cameras clicked. I saw a few pins pause mid-scribble. "As of this morning," I continued, "North Harbor Mechanical is now Harbor-Built Energy Solutions. We've merged with Green Core Midwest to expand our capabilities into sustainable infrastructure. This is more than a name change. It's a total reinvention. Leaner teams, smarter systems, real accountability." I looked around the room, letting the weight of those words settle. We're not chasing headlines. We're chasing impact. I've learned, sometimes the hard way, that real strength is quiet, focused, and unshakable. Questions came flooding in, as expected. The same reporters who once doubted my rise now clung to every word. "What happened to your former executive team? Is this rebranding related to the rumors about your wife and her cousin? Did you step down, or were you pushed out?" I smiled lightly. "Let's just say, illusions were shattered, and truth stood tall." Another hand shot up. "There's talk that your cousin-in-law was supposed to take over operations. Is that accurate?" I didn't blink. Mateo was given a unique opportunity to observe how leadership works. I think we all learned something in the process. That got a few quiet laughs, even from the front row. The message was clear. The story had already begun to spread. What I didn't expect was for Bianca to see it live. Back at the condo that afternoon, my phone buzzed, once, then 5 times. Her number. Again. I didn't answer, of course. But curiosity won, and I opened the voicemail later. "So you're really doing this?" Her voice cracked halfway through. "I saw you. With them. With your little energy empire. You looked so smug. You think you won. You think this makes you better." There was a pause. "Mateo's gone. Left town yesterday. He says you embarrassed him. Says he can't face anyone anymore. My mother won't even speak to me." "You got what you wanted, didn't you?" "No, Bianca. I didn't get what I wanted. What I wanted was loyalty. What I wanted was honesty. What I got instead was manipulation wrapped in silk and served with a kiss on the cheek. This rebirth, it wasn't about victory over you. It was about recovering the parts of myself you tried to erase." That same evening, I went to dinner with Renee and Carlos. We sat at a quiet rooftop restaurant that overlooked the city skyline. The light shimmered below, and the breeze was soft. Carlos raised his glass. "To freedom," he said. Renee added, "and to finally being seen for who we are." I nodded but didn't speak. I just watched the skyline and thought about how many nights I used to stare out windows wondering if I was the one holding everything together or just the one being used. Bianca had built a version of me in her head, useful, predictable, and silent. She never thought to ask what I wanted. She never imagined I had dreams outside of being her husband, her financial backbone, her safety net. When she plotted behind my back, she wasn't just insulting me, she was dismissing the years I spent bleeding into every corner of this business. And now? Now she could only watch from the outside. Word traveled fast. Clients I hadn't spoken to in months called with congratulations. A few even admitted, "We heard things. We're glad you're still steering the ship." One of them, Kendra Hughes, CEO of a rival firm, put it plainly, "You handled that with more grace than most people would have." We all heard about the cousin. I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I just thanked her. Meanwhile, Bianca had gone radio silent again. Probably too humiliated to keep trying. Or maybe still scheming from the shadows, hoping there was a loophole left. But there wasn't. Every account, every contract, every major asset was already restructured, moved, protected. She had no power left, not in the company, not in the finances, and not in my story. I had written her out without ever raising my voice. And now, as the news articles piled up and my inbox flooded with interviews and partnership offers, I realized something else. I hadn't just survived. I had leveled up, not out of vengeance, but out of clarity. Because when someone tries to replace you, erase you, use you as a stepping stone for their own ego, you have 2 choices: break quietly or rebuild loudly. And I chose the second option with precision. indignity, and silence so deafening that even the people who wronged me had to admit they never saw it coming. The first sign came in the form of a forwarded email from a former client. The subject line, "Is this guy serious?" Attached was a message from Mateo, sent from his brand new business email address. It was something like CEO@MateoInnovates.com. No logo, no signature, just desperation wrapped in poor grammar. He had reached out to one of our top clients, a company we'd worked with for 7 years. In the email, Mateo introduced himself as a rising executive consultant and claimed he had been the brains behind North Harbor's recent innovations. He offered to help them cut costs and scale operations using his proven system. Proven system? The only system he'd touched in my company was the coffee machine, and he nearly broke that too. I scrolled down, reading the client's response. It was short, brutal, and perfect. "Thank you, Mateo. However, we prefer to work with professionals who actually understand how invoices work. Kindly lose our contact info." I leaned back in my chair, amused. He was scrambling. Fast. I knew he would. Mateo was all ego and no structure, all appearance and zero depth. Without me guiding him, he was a kid in a warehouse full of buttons, randomly pressing everything until the lights shut off. And that's exactly what started happening. Over the next week, I received multiple indirect updates, some from ex-clients, some from vendors, and a few from the very employees he had tried to poach from my staff. Mateo reached out to me on LinkedIn. My former logistics director messaged me, said he's launching a consulting firm and looking for top-tier talent. I didn't respond. Just thought you'd want to know who's desperate these days. Desperate didn't even begin to cover it. I heard he leased a shared office space downtown, probably trying to look legitimate, but couldn't keep up with the rent after the first month. Apparently, the receptionist told someone that he'd been dodging calls from the building manager. The man was running a ghost company, all smoke, no fire. I didn't even have to do anything. He was crashing on his own. The final straw came when he started recycling some of my old internal documents. Probably thought he was being clever. I recognized one of the proposal layouts he sent to a small contracting firm in Illinois. It was one I'd written 5 years ago. Word for word. That's when I called my lawyer. "Send him a cease and desist for intellectual property infringement," I said. Attach the original timestamps from my cloud archives. My lawyer chuckled. Mateo's about to learn a new word, litigation. And just like that, another door slammed shut in his face. Part of me thought he might show up, knock on my door, or try to confront me in public. But I think deep down, even Mateo knew better. His confidence had cracked. The moment Bianca's plan backfired, he lost the safety net. He wasn't charming anymore. He was exposed. What fascinated me most was the shift in how people viewed him. At first, folks gave him the benefit of the doubt. He was young, enthusiastic, and seemed like he had potential. But when the mask slipped, when it became clear that he didn't actually know anything, reputation moved swiftly in the opposite direction. He tried to host a networking brunch at a local co-working hub. I know because a mutual connection attended and couldn't stop laughing when she messaged me afterward. Mateo gave a 10-minute presentation about vision-driven scaling, then couldn't explain what a vendor contract was when someone asked. Half the room walked out. The other half stayed for the free croissants. I let the message sit there, staring at it. This was never about petty revenge. It was about revelation. I didn't sabotage him. I didn't need to. I just let him believe he was ready, handed him a flashlight with no batteries, and watched him wander into the dark. It reminded me of something Carlos once told me. The best way to teach a fraud is to let them have the stage. Sooner or later, the silence between their words exposes them. Mateo was in that silence now, loud and echoing. But I also noticed something else. Bianca had gone quiet. No more calls. No more dramatic voicemails or angry texts. She'd gone from trying to manipulate me into forgiving her to radio silence. Which, in her case, wasn't peace, it was plotting. She was probably regrouping, embarrassed, licking her wounds in some spa retreat her mother paid for. I didn't care. Let her hide. Meanwhile, I kept building. Our merger with Green Core Midwest officially launched that same week. I brought my new team together for a strategy retreat at the coastal property Carlos owned, clean views, no distractions. We spent 3 days mapping out expansion plans, redesigning supply chains, and exploring eco-housing projects in underserved cities. It was the kind of work that reminded me why I started this business in the first place. One night, after a long session, Camille, my new executive assistant, brought me a folder with compiled projections. "You might want to see these," she said, her tone calm as always. I opened the folder. Inside were updated numbers, revenues climbing steadily, cost reductions ahead of forecast, and partner satisfaction scores rising. One chart caught my eye, Brand Reputation Index. The score had jumped 24% in just the past 2 weeks. I smiled. Not because of the numbers, but because of what they represented. Clarity. When you cut off deadweight, the whole ship sails smoother. Camille tilted her head. You seem content. I am, I said, and not in a flashy way. In a real, quiet way. She nodded and left me to my thoughts. Matteo had tried to replicate what I built without understanding the foundation. Bianca thought she could orchestrate my downfall like a TV drama. But both of them underestimated the man who showed up every day for years, solving real problems, forging real relationships, and studying the system from inside out. You can't fake resilience. And you definitely can't inherit legacy. By the end of the week, word had spread in the business community. Clients who once considered jumping ship now called to express loyalty. Vendors offered better terms. And I got an invitation to speak at an upcoming national sustainability forum. In contrast, Matteo's company website had quietly gone offline. A few days later, one of my contractors forwarded me a meme that had been circulating in a private business group. It showed a cartoon of a man in a suit holding a light bulb with no filament. The caption read, "When you copy the blueprint but forget the wiring." It was titled, "The Matteo Effect." I didn't laugh. Not out loud, anyway. Because deep down, I already knew. The world had taught him the lesson I never needed to say out loud. And the crash? Well, he built that landing all by himself. The first sign that Bianca's world was cracking came through a call I didn't answer. My phone lit up at 2:41 a.m., a time no one calls unless something has gone very wrong. I stared at the screen. Her name, glowing, pulsing. She didn't leave a voicemail. Just hung up. Then called again. Then again. Then once more. For missed calls. No messages. Just silence where panic used to be hidden behind pride. By morning, I found out why. Apparently, she had gone to access one of our shared savings accounts only to find a grand total of $18.43. The rest? Long gone. Shifted, safeguarded, and sitting comfortably behind legal protections she didn't know existed. It wasn't theft. It was foresight. Months before she even suggested Matteo come into the business, I had been preparing. Not because I knew she would betray me, but because something in her changed, her tone, her timing, her hunger for something that didn't include us. And when I saw that shift, I did what any man with clarity would do. I acted. I had closed every loophole without her even noticing. Every joint account had been split. Every credit line moved to a different structure. I hadn't taken what was hers. I'd simply removed what was mine from a place she assumed would always be hers too. That morning, Bianca showed up at the condo. I wasn't surprised. She buzzed the gate from her car, but I didn't answer. I watched through the security camera as she stood there, arms crossed, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy, pretending she wasn't unraveling. Eventually, she left, but not before leaving a voice note. You made your point, she said, her voice thin and brittle. I get it. You won. But this is childish. Childish. That was rich, coming from someone who conspired with her cousin like a soap opera villain, sent a text message in another language thinking I was too dumb to read it, and kissed my cheek each night like she hadn't already planned my removal. But sure, I was the childish one. The next day, her mother tried calling me. I didn't answer that either. But I did forward her number to my lawyer with a note. If any of them contact me again, I want a no contact clause included in the divorce terms. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. A bit informal for a lawyer, but I appreciated the efficiency. Then came the real hit. Bianca went to the house. Our old house. The one she fought so hard to decorate like a showroom, with furniture no one ever sat on and art she couldn't pronounce. She tried to throw a small gathering there, some kind of imagery building dinner, I heard through a mutual acquaintance. But when the guests arrived, the utilities had been cut. Water off. Lights out. No AC. Her catering was late. Her phone died. And when she tried to use the card we used to share to cover emergency replacements, declined. It wasn't my fault. That card had been closed months ago. She just hadn't noticed. Or maybe she noticed and assumed I hadn't acted on it. She texted me that night, one long paragraph. At first, it was civil. I know we didn't end things perfectly, but maybe we can talk. Then, midway through, it shifted. You embarrassed me. You planned this. You took everything. Matteo's gone. My mom is blaming me. My friends won't even reply to my messages anymore. And at the very end, the part that caught me off guard. Was I really that easy to throw away? I stared at that line for a long time. And I remembered all the nights she sat across from me at dinner, scrolling through her phone instead of talking. I remembered the birthdays she forgot, the times she rolled her eyes at my work stories, the silent disdain in her smile when I told her something good had happened at the office. I remembered the text she sent to her mother, the one that started it all. Once he's done training Mateo, we'll divorce him. He's just the test dummy. That wasn't a joke. That was a blueprint. So no, Bianca wasn't thrown away. She was unmasked. Her world had been built on borrowed confidence. She projected the perfect marriage, perfect future, perfect control. But now the curtains were down, and what remained was the uncomfortable truth. She didn't know who she was without someone else's shine to reflect. A few days later, I got an email from our old property manager. Bianca had defaulted on the mortgage. She hadn't made a payment since the transition. Apparently, she assumed I was still covering the bills. She was wrong. I had already moved into the beach condo, changed my primary address, and filed legal notice that I was no longer financially responsible for that property. She hadn't paid attention to the paperwork I slid across her side of the kitchen island weeks before we separated. She had signed it in a rush, trusting that I was still the same silent partner in her little world. The same man who would do anything to keep the peace. The same man who once said, "Don't worry, I've got it," even when she offered nothing in return. But that man was gone. She sent one more message after that. No voice this time. Just text. "You really planned this down to the last minute, didn't you? Even my car gone. You took it back." Yes, I did. Because it was leased under my name. And I wasn't about to let her drive around in something she once used to pick up her cousin from networking events where they introduced him as the next visionary. The next visionary who now lived out of a short-term rental in another city, trying to peddle fake success stories to anyone who would listen. And Bianca? She was stranded in the ruins of a plan she swore was genius. Let her sit there. Let her feel it. Let her realize that everything she thought made her powerful, status, access, fake influence, was only ever possible because I allowed it. Because I built the stage she performed on. And when I took my spotlight and left, she had nothing left to say. The worst kind of revenge isn't rage. It's absence. After all the dust settled, after the staged betrayal, the silent takedown, and the complete financial cutoff, I didn't throw a party. I didn't post a triumphant message on social media or blast my story into the world. No fireworks. No victory speech. Just stillness. It's funny how peace can feel louder than revenge when it finally shows up. I spent the first week alone in my beach condo. The ocean became my clock. No alarm bells, no performance schedules, no forced dinner conversations. Just waves rolling in and out like they'd been waiting for me to shut up and listen. I let the silence wash over me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. But peace didn't mean stopping. I didn't survive all that just to live in retreat. I had too much inside me still, too many ideas, too many plans. So I did what I've always done when life forces me to rebuild. I built again. Only this time, I built differently. One morning, I reached out to Camille. We hadn't spoken in a few months, not since that nonprofit project we'd both worked on in Greenville, the one where she coordinated 3 teams with nothing but a tablet and a steel voice. I remembered watching her back then, thinking, she's not here for the spotlight. She's here for the mission. I needed that kind of energy. I asked her if she'd consider coming on board as my new executive assistant, not just to manage my schedule, but to help rebuild a culture I could actually be proud of. She accepted the same day. We met in person the following week at the office space I had just signed for. A modest but modern 2-floor workspace with glass walls and exposed wood. No marble floors, no gold fixtures, just clarity. I brought in plants, natural light, and a small corner library. The place didn't scream power. It breathed purpose. Camille stepped in and immediately started organizing chaos I hadn't realized was still hanging around. Within hours, we had new digital systems set up, a tight comm structure, and an early sketch of what would soon become our next division, Harbor-Built Eco Projects. The vision was simple. Build sustainable housing solutions using local labor, recycled materials, and scalable technology. Not just for wealthy clients in glass towers, but for families in underserved cities, for schools, shelters, and forgotten towns. I was no longer just building contracts. I was building legacy. The first time I stood in front of the new team, hand-picked, lean, focused, I felt something shift inside me. These weren't people impressed by titles or power suits. These were people who cared about the work. Engineers, architects, environmental strategists, folks who had done the grunt labor and wanted to change the rules from the inside. I told them the truth on day one. We're not here to impress. We're here to disrupt quietly. We're here to lead with action. We're here to build better, not just bigger. Renee, now fully integrated as VP of Strategy, nodded across the room. Camille stood at the back, arms folded, watching everyone like she was already 2 steps ahead. And me? I felt reborn. While we worked, I started hearing things. Whispers from the old world I'd left behind. People were talking. Some clients who had once clinked champagne glasses with Bianca now reached out discreetly, asking to get back in the loop. I didn't hold grudges. I just raised the bar. They'd have to meet it. Bianca, on the other hand, wasn't doing well. I didn't go looking for updates, but when people send you screenshots, you can't always ignore them. Her Instagram had shifted from travel reels and rooftop brunches to vague motivational quotes. Her smile and photos looked thinner, more forced. The captions went from #building-your-future to healing in progress. I scrolled through one post where she quoted something about lessons turning into blessings and shook my head. She wasn't learning. She was still performing. The audience had just changed. I never liked sharing pain publicly. There was a dignity in suffering quietly, in working behind closed doors and letting your results tell the story. That's why I ignored every headline, every side comment, every person who asked, "Aren't you going to expose her? Tell the full story." No, I didn't need to expose her. She already exposed herself. Every person she tried to impress watched her fall apart without my help. The story told itself. She lost her footing not because I pushed her, but because I stepped away. And yet, something inside me hoped she found a way to start again. Not because I wanted her to succeed, but because I needed her to stop orbiting my life. I needed her to find her own path so she'd stop trying to sabotage mine. Mateo, as far as I knew, had vanished from the business world. Rumor had it he'd moved to another city, took a job in sales, and started going by Matt instead of Mateo. As if changing the name could erase what people remembered. It couldn't. A few months into our new projects, something happened that caught me by surprise. One of our site managers brought a handwritten note to my desk. No envelope. No return name. Just folded once, left with reception. It read, "You didn't just walk away. You rose above. I thought I was building something strong, but I was standing on sand. Thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like. I see it now. I hope one day I can be something close to that." No signature. But I didn't need one. I read it once. Then again. Then folded it and tucked it into my desk drawer. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That message wasn't for me to validate. It was her coming to terms with what she lost. And what I'd found. My purpose was no longer tied to proving anything to her, or to the world that once overlooked me. My mission was forward-facing. Quiet. Focused. Harbor Built was thriving. Our first eco-complex broke ground in a rural town 2 states over. News outlets called it a blueprint for how construction should work in the new era. Industry blogs featured our story not for the drama, but for the discipline. They praised our quiet rise. They called it visionary. But me? I just called it healing. The kind that doesn't come from revenge or recognition. The kind that comes from starting over, without apology, without theatrics. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Not in spite of what they did, but because I chose something better. It was late afternoon when my receptionist buzzed in. "There's someone here asking for you. She says it's important." I was reviewing blueprints for our latest eco-housing site, the kind of work that had become my piece, tangible, forward, without drama. I looked up at the speaker as if her voice had disrupted a meditation. Did she give a name? She hesitated. She didn't need to. I already knew. I stood slowly, exhaled, and said, "Send her up. But give me 5 minutes." I cleared my desk. Not because I needed the space, but because I didn't want any part of this encounter mixed with the future I was building. I didn't want her words, her presence, her sadness touching the work that had pulled me out of the wreckage she left me in. When the knock came, it was soft, uncertain, a far cry from the woman who used to slam cabinet doors for punctuation. I opened the door. There she was, Bianca, but not the Bianca I remembered. Her hair wasn't curled. Her makeup was uneven, like she'd put it on in the car. Her clothes were designer, yes, but wrinkled in the wrong places. And her eyes, they weren't just tired. They were hollow. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. Wordless. She walked in slowly, like she expected the floor to collapse beneath her. I offered her no seat, no drink. She didn't ask. For a while, she just looked around. At the walls. At the sunlight pouring in from the windows. At the awards and clean sketches on the side table. "This place is beautiful," she said, barely above a whisper. "It looks like you." I didn't respond. She turned to face me. "I didn't know you spoke Spanish." There it was. Her opening line. "I didn't know you were capable of cruelty," I replied. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "It wasn't supposed to go like that. It went exactly how you planned it. Your words. Your timeline. Your cousin." I wasn't thinking straight. "My mother." I cut her off with a glance. "Don't blame your mother. You didn't text her because you were confused. You texted her to celebrate. You were proud of what you were doing." She lowered her eyes. Silence stretched across the room. "I came to say I'm sorry," she said eventually. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve anything from you. I needed to say it out loud." I stared at her. This woman who had once stood beside me at ribbon cuttings and fundraisers. The same woman who kissed me at midnight on New Year's Eve while already planning my erasure. She stepped closer. "I know I destroyed something real. And I know you won't forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me either." She paused, looked at the ground. "You didn't yell. You didn't fight back. You didn't drag me through court or smear my name. You just vanished. Quietly. That was worse than rage. It made me feel like I never existed to you." I walked to my drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. Thick. Sealed. Tidy. I handed it to her. She looked at it, confused. "What's this?" "Divorce papers," I said. "Everything's finalized. It's fair. Legal. Clean. You don't owe me anything. And I don't owe you any more pain." She took the envelope slowly, as if it might burn her hands. "I had a dream last week," she whispered. "We were at the marina. Like old times. I asked you why you weren't looking at me. And you said, because I already saw the truth." I said nothing. She blinked fast, like she was fighting something inside. "You always saw through people. That's what made you great. And I thought, if I kept you distracted long enough, maybe you wouldn't see through me." I crossed my arms. "But I did." She nodded. "You did. And I hate that you didn't scream when you found out. I hate that you were so calm. Because it meant I couldn't paint you as the villain. I had to sit in my own mess. You made your own silence," I said. "Now you have to live in it." She looked around again. "You've built something incredible. I built something peaceful." She laughed bitterly. "You always used to say that. Peace is more expensive than power." I didn't get it then. "You do now." She stared at the envelope again. "You really planned this? From the moment you read that text?" "No," I said. "I started planning the moment I realized you saw me as replaceable." She shook her head. "I didn't think you'd actually walk away. You thought I'd stay," I finished for her. "That I'd train your cousin, take your insults, keep the lights on, and smile while doing it. You thought love meant never leaving, even when it became abuse." She let out a shaky breath. Is there anything left in you that misses me?" I paused. Not to be cruel, but because I wanted to be honest. "I miss the version of you that existed before ambition became arrogance," I said. "I miss the girl who danced in the kitchen barefoot, who laughed without checking her reflection. But that girl disappeared a long time ago. You buried her beneath champagne dreams and cousin-powered betrayals." Her chin quivered. "I'm sorry," she said again, softer. I nodded once. "Good." She looked like she wanted to say more. But I didn't want to hear it. She turned, walked to the door, and stopped. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not destroying me." I looked her dead in the eye. I didn't have to. She left. The door closed behind her. I stood in that silence for a full minute, then walked over to the window. The sky was warm and gold, the kind of light that makes even the shadows look calm. Camille knocked gently a few minutes later and stepped in. "Everything okay?" "Everything's done," I said. Finally. She glanced at the closed door, then at me. "You handled it better than most people would have." "I didn't need to break her," I said, returning to my desk. "She broke herself." Camille nodded. "So what's next?" I looked at the wall, at the map of the next construction site, the blueprint of a community center we were funding, the framed quote that read, "Do not build monuments for people who tried to bury you." "We keep building," I said. "We build better." 1 year later, I stood beneath a clean, steel archway with sunlight warming the back of my neck. The ribbon in front of me shimmered slightly in the coastal wind, stretched across the entrance of our new headquarters, Harbor Built Energy Solutions, a name carved not just into the stone above the doorway, but into everything I had become. Around me stood people I trusted. Camille to my right, clipboard in hand, I scanning the crowd for any signs of hiccups. Renee nearby, speaking quietly with a few city officials we had partnered with on our latest urban eco project. Carlos in the back, leaning against a tree with his arms crossed and a satisfied smirk on his face, like a proud uncle at graduation. No chaos. No drama. No sabotage hiding behind sweet smiles. Just calm momentum. We were celebrating the opening of our second location. From the outside, it looked like a standard corporate expansion. But to me, it was personal. This wasn't just a ribbon. It was a red line between the man I used to be and the man who finally understood his own worth. As I held the ceremonial scissors in my hand, someone in the crowd called out, "Say a few words." A few light claps followed. I looked around, met the moment, then stepped up to the small podium beside the ribbon. No speech prepared, just clarity in my chest and truth in my bones. I was once told I was just a stepping stone. I began. Someone to teach others how to build, only to be discarded when the structure was finished. A quiet murmur. Cameras clicked. Phones rose in the air. But sometimes, the best way to prove you're not the dummy is to let people try. Let them believe you're replaceable. Let them take your silence for weakness. Because when the dust settles and the mirrors crack, the truth stands unshaken. More heads nodded now. A few knowing looks passed between those who'd followed the company's journey since the storm. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to fight dirty to win. Sometimes, the best revenge is success without bitterness. Peace without compromise. I looked at the sign again. Harbor built. What I built wasn't just a company. It was proof that you could lose everything, be betrayed, used, erased, and still come back with your head high and your name clean. This, I said, gesturing to the building behind me, isn't just the result of resilience. It's a reminder that even when they try to erase you, your blueprint is still yours. And some of us, I paused, letting the moment breathe. Some of us build better from the rubble. The crowd applauded, but I wasn't looking for their validation. I stepped down, took the scissors, and cut the ribbon with one clean motion. It was done. After the ceremony, I moved through the crowd with ease. Old colleagues came up to shake my hand. Some apologized for not believing in me when things got messy. I didn't hold it against them. Everyone chooses their silence when drama unfolds. I chose mine too, but mine came with planning. I caught sight of someone standing across the street, half in shadow. Bianca. She didn't approach. Just still. No flashy car or designer coat. Just her, in quiet observation. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. She'd already received her final message. Eventually, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the passing crowd like a ghost with no one left to haunt. I went back inside. Camille was waiting by my office. "Your 2 o'clock meeting confirmed," she said, then smiled. "Also, the local news wants a follow-up interview." "Let them wait," I replied. "I'm in no rush to become a headline again." She grinned. "Understood." My office overlooked the harbor. I liked the symmetry of that. Watching the water I used to sit beside when I felt invisible. The same water I stared into the day Bianca told me to train Matteo, thinking I'd just go along like a good soldier. That day, she saw a pawn. What she didn't realize is I was already 5 moves ahead. I opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo. One of the very first team I worked with when I started North Harbor Mechanical. Back when I was running deliveries myself and fixing heating units in the winter just to keep the lights on. Everyone looked tired in the picture, but we were smiling. Back then, we didn't have funding or fame, just grit. And that grit, it stayed with me through everything. Through the moment I heard Bianca's voice telling her mother I was just the test dummy. Through every fake smile she gave me while plotting my exit. Through Matteo's empty arrogance and every insult they thought I never heard. I rose because I remembered who I was before I was told I wasn't enough. And I built because building is in my blood. Not for applause, not for revenge, but because creation is louder than destruction. My phone buzzed again. This time a message from one of the construction leads on site. Phase 1 complete. Locals are already asking if they can volunteer during Phase 2. That meant more than any article ever could. We weren't just building walls. We were building community. A knock at the door. "Camille again. You have a call from the governor's office. They want to discuss funding for your low-income housing project." I smiled. "Tell them I'll call back." She tilted her head. "Everything okay?" I looked around. The sunlight. The clean desk. The plans pinned to the walls. My name on the letterhead. The peace I earned. Yeah, I said. Everything's better than okay. She left me alone again. I stood by the window, arms folded, and watched the harbor. Bianca once said I was just a test dummy. But now I was the man they couldn't dismantle. The one who let them believe they'd won while quietly rewriting the ending. They tried to turn me into a footnote. I became a blueprint. They tried to bury me in silence. I built an empire in it. And now, standing at the top of my own legacy, I finally said the words aloud that I'd waited so long to believe. They thought I was the dummy. I smiled. But I was the designer.